Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome to Fear Street Explored, where your worst nightmares live. This week, I'm excited to visit The Sleepwalker. I really enjoyed this book overall. It plays around with some supernatural elements that I was missing from the Goosebumps books, and had a protagonist who wasn't super annoying for a change. Towards the end, the book moves in a direction I didn't love, but it kept my interest throughout the whole story. It's for sure worth checking out if you haven't yet. This 1990 cover is pretty great. Right away, it's giving me some Nightmare on Elm Street vibes, with this girl walking around in a dreamish landscape in her nightgown looking possessed. We can also see that she's splashing through water, which becomes a big part of the story later. Our front take says, she isn't safe, even in her dreams, which is a nice hint at the plot of this book. Our back take says, somebody help, don't let me sleepwalk again, which may be our most uninspired book take so far, but let's check out the full blurb on the back. 1 week after she starts her summer job on Fear Street with old Mrs. Cotler, Myra Barnes begins to sleepwalk. How terrifying to wake up outdoors in the middle of the night and not know where she is. Myra becomes even more terrified when she discovers Miss Cotler may be a witch. Is the old woman casting a spell on Myra to make her sleepwalk? To add to Myra's horror, she's being followed by a menacing stranger who seems to recognize her, but she's never seen him in her life. Myra's sleepwalking is leading her into more and more peril. She soon realizes she must take action. She must find out what's happening to her, or she may never leave Fear Street alive. Okay, let's start this summary. The book opens with a prologue. This one actually involves our protagonist, Myra, and contains no murder. Instead, Myra's busy gliding across her front lawn in the middle of the night because, like the title suggests, she's sleepwalking. Myra wakes up at the end of her driveway, cold and confused, and then hurries back inside. We then jump to 1 week earlier, as Myra is having a summer morning breakfast with her younger sister Kim and single mom Nancy. They're having an unappetizing plate of scrambled eggs that Stine describes as looking like vomit multiple times. Myra is starting a new job today. She's going to be the part-time caretaker for Mrs. Cotler, an older woman who Myra's mom is wary of. Myra's mom is a nurse and took care of Miss Cotler the previous year, and apparently she was a pain in the ass the entire time. Myra's going to be making a whopping $5 an hour, but she's nervous to start this job. She mostly just has to tidy up the house, make the old woman lunch, and read to her, so it's not a bad gig. Little sister Kim gets on the bus to day camp, the mom heads to work, and Myra starts her walk towards Fear Street, because of course that's where Miss Cotler is going to be located, otherwise we wouldn't have a story. We jump to 3 days later at Miss Cotler's house, and so far things are going really well. She's a pleasant old lady who repeats herself a bit, and can get kinda moody, but nothing terrible. Hazel the cat, on the other hand, starts the chapter off by breaking Myra's beaded necklace that she got from her boyfriend Walker right before he left on vacation. Miss Cotler's house is also notably full of strange knickknacks, like they covered the tables and counters and windowsills, were arranged in special glass display cases, and stood beside the books in the bookshelves. Myra found colorful vases and ancient-looking pieces of sculpture, porcelain figures of strange-looking people, antique jars filled with shells or feathers or colorful powders, carved cats and birds of stone and wood, a tiny pair of white gloves stained brown with age, rimless eyeglasses and a monocle, faded pressed flowers, a ceramic chicken foot, several carved moon crescents, and a stuffed white owl. As a fellow lover of treasures, I appreciate Miss Cotler's style. Myra and Miss Cotler also go on a daily afternoon walk around the Fear Street Lake, which has become Myra's least favorite part of the job because for some reason the lake puts her on edge. On one of these walks, Miss Cotler casually mentions that she lost her son, Vincent, to this lake when he was only 3 years old, and sometimes she still thinks she can see him swimming out there in it. I don't know if I would want daily walks to the spot where my son died. That feels a little morbid. It's also worth mentioning that despite Miss Cotler being very old, she actually looks great and barely wrinkled according to Myra. Later, while hunting for a sweater for Miss Cotler, Myra stumbles across a drawer full of strange black candles before getting hissed at by Hazel the cat. She closes the drawer, but can't get over how weird the candles are, or how judgmental Hazel looked. I feel like cats are just judgmental by nature, so she shouldn't take it too personally. Myra heads home and spends her walk thinking about her new boyfriend, Walker, and her deadbeat dad who took off a year ago and hasn't reached out since. I feel like the kids of Fear Street all have family drama. She's then startled by her ex-boyfriend Link, who she dumped like a month ago. He's been following and calling her nonstop, begging for a second chance ever since. Tonight is no different, and Myra tells him to piss off as she hurries home. The next day, while Myra is reading to Miss Cotler, they're interrupted by angry pounding on the door. It ends up being the neighbor, Mr. Cleep. But Miss Cotler keeps calling him Mr. Clean, and it's kind of funny. He's pissed that her peach tree keeps dropping peaches in his backyard and it's stopping him from mowing. Personally, I would be thrilled about free peaches, but angry Mr. Clean threatens to cut down Miss Cotler's peach tree. She tells him he won't be doing anything like that, and warns him to calm down in this kind of heat. He storms off, dropping his sweaty handkerchief, and Miss Cotler tucks it into her pocket while looking mischievous. They go back inside and we learn Walker is super into magic and the supernatural because Myra tries to send him a telepathic message that she misses him. This is presented so casually that I don't think we're supposed to regard it as weird. Eventually, Miss Cotler says she's feeling tired and says Myra can head home early after she walks up to her bedroom. Before leaving, Myra notices she forgot to leave Mrs. Cotler's cane by her bed, so she hurries upstairs. Hazel starts hissing aggressively and really doesn't want Myra to go into Mrs. Cotler's bedroom, but she just marches past the cat. She then spots Mrs. Cotler sitting in the dark, holding Mr. Clean's handkerchief, and she seems to be in some sort of trance. Myra sets down the cane and then nopes on out of there in a hurry. That night, she tells her best friend Donna Cash all about it, and she thinks Myra is just being dramatic because Myra is already certain that this must mean she's a witch. During this call, we also learn ex-boyfriend Link has a slightly younger sister named Stephanie that Myra and Donna are also really good friends with. Donna points out that Stephanie hasn't called since the breakup, and it occurs to Myra that Stephanie may be mad at her. It's also worth noting that Stephanie is into witchy stuff too, so Stine is clearly building up a list of suspects for when things get wild. So far, we have Walker studying to be a magician, Miss Cotler being weird with candles in the dark, and Stephanie reading all about the occult. We then jump to the next day, and Myra sees an ambulance as she's turning down Fear Street. She races to Mrs. Cotler's house, and is relieved to see the ambulance is not for her, but for the neighbor. She then spots Mrs. Cotler gleefully watching with Hazel in her arms as they haul the angry Mr. Clean away because it looks like he broke a hip. It's then a few days later, and Walker's returned from his family vacation. He's shy and awkward, but Myra likes that about him. He even tries to shake her hand when he first sees her versus giving her a kiss. He's still very into magic and jokes about trying to hypnotize a mule at the Grand Canyon, and immediately wants to show her 3 new card tricks. He also notices that Myra isn't wearing the beads he got her, and it occurs to her that she still needs to get them back from Mrs. Cotler, because she offered to restring them after Hazel slashed the necklace earlier in the story. After her date, Myra heads home and chats with her mom a bit before heading to bed. That night, she has a dream where she's standing at the edge of a blue lake and is soon walking across the water, like Jesus. As she reaches the center of the lake, she spots somebody watching from the shore and feels scared. She then opens her eyes and realizes she's walked outside of her house in the middle of the night. The next chapter opens with Myra at Mrs. Cotler's house. She brings up sleepwalking, but doesn't get much of a response out of the old woman, although Miss Cotler doesn't seem surprised at all that Myra is asking about it. After work, Myra has to catch a bus to the mall, so this involves walking past the Fear Street Cemetery. She notices 2 kids playing there and goes to chase them off because she knows how dangerous the Fear Street Cemetery is rumored to be. She suddenly can't find the kids, but soon a giant man appears from his house across the street and is aggressively staring at Myra. She gets the creeps and starts to run, and he starts to chase after her, telling her to stop. She manages to get away from him and onto the bus safely, where she can keep asking herself questions about the sleepwalking episode. I've learned with these Fear Street books that like 1/5 of the story is just the main character repeating elements of the plot over and over to themselves. Once at the mall, Myra gets hungry and decides to stop for pizza when she spots none other than the trashiest girl in school, Sookie Thomas, and she's not alone. She's with Walker and they're holding hands and romancing. The bastard. This ends up just being a misunderstanding though, because Sookie and Walker just ran into each other at the magic shop, decided to get some pizza, and he was in the middle of showing her a magic trick with a coin. Likely story. We should also keep with tradition and admire Sookie's punk style. This week, she's wearing her trademark bleach blonde spiked hair, cut off denim jeans with purple tights, and a matching purple t-shirt. Myra ends up feeling awkward about how she reacted and blurts out how she was chased in the graveyard earlier by a giant man, and then has to race home because it's getting late. At dinner that night, her mom tries to assure her that sleepwalking isn't that big of a deal and probably won't happen again, but Myra is still worried about it. There's a knock at the door, and it's Link's sister Stephanie. Myra and her make some awkward small talk before Stephanie starts tearing into Myra about dumping her brother. Myra holds her ground well though, and is basically like, "You can't guilt trip me into dating your weirdo brother." Stephanie gets pissed and tells Myra she'll be sorry before storming out of the house and taking one of Myra's scarves with her. The next chapter opens with Myra walking across the lake again, which means she must be sleepwalking. She opens her eyes, and this time she's standing in the middle of a mud puddle next to some woods and has no idea where she is. After walking towards a distant street lamp, she discovers she's walked all the way to Fear Street, which is not where anyone wants to find themselves in the middle of the night. Lucky for her, a cop stops and offers her a ride home, which she gladly accepts. Her mom doesn't think the sleepwalking is so funny this time when Myra arrives home in the back of a cop car and promises to take her to a psychologist who specializes in sleep disorders once he returns from his vacation next week. Walker stops by the next morning before Myra leaves for work because he's really worried about her nighttime adventures. He even offers to hypnotize her to see if they can figure out what her dream is trying to tell her. Myra rightfully turns down this offer because no thanks to that shit. When Myra finally makes it to work, she can't find Mrs. Cotler. She wanders up to her bedroom and notices the beads Walker gave her next to a black melted candle. She thinks it's odd that Miss Cotler hasn't even tried to restring them yet, and then wonders why she would have them out in the first place. She can hear Miss Cotler in the shower and quickly sneaks back downstairs. Later, Miss Cotler comments that Myra looks tired and suggests that her nurse mother should know to send her to bed earlier, confirming that Miss Cotler does remember Myra's mom being a nurse last year. After work, it's raining and Myra's walking past the cemetery when a hand plops onto her shoulder. This just ends up being Link, who can't seem to take no for an answer. He ends up giving Myra a ride home with the promise that he won't beg for another chance, but he makes it weird. They then have a long ride in silence, with Link seething at being rejected again. At home, Myra finds Donna outside her house, sporting some day-glow green short shorts. She informs Myra that a giant man named Cal stopped by earlier looking for her and had gotten the address of Mrs. Cotler. The two girls talk some more about sleepwalking before Myra finally states that she thinks Miss Cotler is using her necklace beads to make her sleepwalk because she thinks she may be a witch. The next chapter opens with Myra and her family, plus Donna, hanging out at the uncle's lake cabin for the weekend. They're hopeful that the change in scenery might help Myra's sleepwalking. She still can't get her mind off the sleepwalking and Miss Cotler though, even when she's having a peaceful canoe ride with Donna. At the shore, her little sister Kim has made friends with a boy named Andy who's about 5. He throws a plastic car in the water to watch it float, and this causes Myra to freak the fuck out. She starts shrieking, "No, no, no, no!" And when she calms down, she has no idea why she had such a strong reaction to a toy car being tossed in the water. We're then back in Shadyside, and Myra is late for Mrs. Cotler's again. She hasn't been sleeping very much because she's afraid she'll have her weird lake dream and start sleepwalking. Donna stops by to borrow a car, so she can get to the orthodontist in the next town over, which I'm sure will lead to something later on, because otherwise, why would Stine have this girl borrowing Myra's mom's car? When Donna drops Myra off, she notices Mrs. Cotler is watching closely, and once again remarks how young Miss Cotler looks for her age. We then learn that Mrs. Cotler will be visiting her sick sister in Vermont for a few days, so Myra will just need to stop by the house to feed Hazel and water the plants. We also have a scene with Mrs. Cotler chopping pig knuckles with a giant cleaver for her sister, which Myra finds unsettling. Later at home, Myra returns and is surprised to find it empty. The phone rings, and shocker, it's her mom telling her that Donna has been in a bad accident. Who saw that coming? She puts Donna on the phone, and we learn she has a broken leg, wrist, and some bruised ribs. Apparently, some mysterious truck started ramming Donna on the highway, causing her to crash. Myra immediately thinks Miss Coulter had something to do with it, but when she hears that the truck was red, she also suspects ex-boyfriend Link because he has a red truck and has been bitter about Myra's rejections. We then jump to Myra visiting Walker at his house, where she interrupts a phone call, causing him to blush. I don't know, but I feel like Walker is up to no good. He's just an odd duck and always blushing about everything. Myra updates him on the events of the story so far, and he agrees that Miss Cotler might be a witch. They eventually conclude they're gonna have to search Miss Cotler's house for evidence while she's gone. And we don't have to wait long, because by the next page, they're in the house feeding Hazel. They wander into Mrs. Cotler's library, and realize there's an entire wall dedicated to witchcraft and the occult, including one shelf filled with books on sleepwalking. Myra grabs a couple to look at later, and leads Walker upstairs so she can show him the weird black candles she saw earlier in the story. She then notices some framed school pictures of Link and Stephanie, so it's looking like we have a witchy family on our hands. Myra is stunned that no one ever brought this up before. She digs through a desk and learns through a birthday card that Miss Cotler is Stephanie and Link's aunt. Myra races to the bedroom to grab her beads back from the jewelry box, but is startled to see that they're gone. Throughout all of this snooping, Hazel's been underfoot and hissing at them because she's also clearly witchy. We then have a few pages where Myra stops and visits Donna in the hospital, so we can once again rehash this plot for a bit. She then decides to visit Stephanie so she can confront her about all this witch shit. She knocks on the door, but no one answers, so she lets herself in true Stine fashion. She creeps up the stairs to Stephanie's room, where she finds the girl sitting in the dark in the middle of a circle of candles, chanting, while she has Myra's scarf tied around her head. That's some pretty damning witchy evidence. Myra comes at Stephanie guns blazing, and she just dismisses all of Myra's accusations and tells her that she's been into the occult for a while now and she was just practicing, so it's no big deal. She also says her hair was wet from the shower, so that's why she used the scarf to keep it off her shoulders. Plus, Stephanie says that she told Myra that Miss Coulter was her aunt forever ago. She's just a bad listener. This girl is just full of excuses. Myra continues to accuse her of casting spells on her, and Stephanie retorts that Myra's just mad because Walker's gonna dump her for Sookie Thomas, and that everybody knows they've been getting closer. This pisses Myra off and she storms out of the house, where she runs into Link. She takes the time to examine his red truck, but doesn't see any damage, so she doesn't think he's the one who crashed into Donna. We then cut to Myra mid-lake dream, where she's once again walking on the water and can feel somebody watching her from the shore. She finally catches a glimpse of this mystery person, and it's Walker. Myra then wakes up and finds herself full-on drowning in the middle of Fear Lake. Once again, she's rescued by a random guy who just happened to be doing some late-night fishing when he spotted her in the water. Myra vomits lake water all over the boat and then is returned to her mom. The next day, Myra's off to the psychiatrist, Dr. Stine, but while walking through this labyrinth of a hospital for like 4 pages, she stumbles across Cal, the giant man who chased her in the cemetery earlier. He's waiting outside the psychiatric office too and doesn't spot her at first. When he does see her, his face flashes red and he starts to chase after her. Eventually, 2 nurses restrain him and Myra's able to hide in Dr. Stine's office. She's surprised to see that this doctor is so young and fairly friendly. Soon, she's telling him all about the sleepwalking in her weird lake dreams. When she's all done, Dr. Stine informs her that he thinks she has some sort of repressed trauma that's manifesting itself into sleepwalking. She hasn't told him anything about Miss Cotler or the witchy stuff, but thinks that's probably for the best for now. He writes her a prescription for a sleep aid and wants her to come back weekly until he can sort out what's bothering her subconscious. Myra stops by and visits Donna once again for some plot rehashing, and eventually concludes she needs to visit the lake because the lake's what's been bothering her all along. That night, Myra sneaks out to sit by the lake to see if it can inspire anything in her. She invited Walker to join her, but he was too busy babysitting. He insisted Myra not go alone, but she lied and went anyways. While sitting next to the shore, she can hear footsteps approaching. She tries to hide in some bushes, but isn't quick enough, and it just ends up being Link, who claims to have seen her walking down Fear Street and was curious. Isn't it funny how this weirdo ex-boyfriend just happens to see her all the time? Frickin' stalker. She accuses him of running Donna off the road, which he seems confused about and denies it. He then gets aggressive and grabs her by the arms, demanding she admit that she misses him too because he can't get over her. He pins her arms to her sides and tries to force a kiss on her. Thankfully, Myra's able to squirm free and punch him in the side of the head. She then dives into the lake to escape, and a rush of memories wash over her, and she can hear the sounds of screams playing in her head. I guess she's supposed to be digging through some repressed memories. The early 90s were all about repressed memories, hypnotism, and satanic panic. It's worth reading about if you're interested in that stuff. The McMartin preschool trials are a good start. FYI, repressed memories are now considered to be largely bunk. Link drives Myra home, and she heads to bed, where she reveals this repressed memory of a Saturday night. It was her and Walker's 3rd date, and some kids were teasing him at the mall for being into magic. Myra and Walker leave and then hop into a car that Walker claims is his mom's car, but we find out he actually just stole it. When Myra confronts him about the stolen car they're in, he has a wild look in his eyes and begins driving crazy around town. They end up driving towards River Ridge, the shady side makeout spot overlooking a river, but Walker's reckless driving ends up causing an accident. They smash into the side of another car, send it crashing off a cliff and into the water. There are 2 people inside, and Myra watches as a large man surfaces, but the passenger doesn't. Walker then pulls Myra away from the crash site, but that's all she can remember. She immediately calls Walker, and they agree to meet the next evening. We then hop to the shore of Fear Lake, where Myra and Walker are sitting peacefully. She asks him to hypnotize her so she can relax and sleep again, but this is all a setup. She really just wants to see if he'll try to make her continue to forget the night of the car crash on River Ridge, which he does when he tells her to keep forgetting all about the accident. Myra pops up and calls him a filthy creep and accuses him of manipulating her this entire time. She then says she's going to go to the police, which maybe wait until you're not all alone with a psychopath to say that. Walker's like, "You can't ruin my plans. I'm going to be a famous magician someday." He then grabs Myra and starts to drown her in the lake. She tries to wiggle away, but he holds her under the water until her lungs feel ready to burst. She then hears commotion above the water. When she surfaces, she can see Hazel has latched onto Walker's face, is in full-on attack mode. Black Cat's to the rescue. Myra is able to run away from the lake and call the police from inside Miss Cotler's house. She slumps onto the floor and is confused when she spots Hazel curled up in a ball right next to her. Because she's magic, duh. A rock then comes flying through the kitchen window because Walker hasn't given up yet. He crawls through the window, bloody from cat scratches all over his face. Myra tries to talk him down, but it's no use. He's ready to kill her. She snatches up the meat cleaver Miss Coulter was chopping up pig knuckles with earlier and waves it at Walker. Myra is not prepared to chop him up though, and he wrestles the cleaver out of her hands. Myra races for the front door, but when she opens it, she finds Cal on the doorstep with his red truck parked behind him, meaning he was the one who ran Donna off the road. Myra's surrounded now by 2 men who want to kill her, and she thinks she's truly fucked. Except Cal lunges past Myra, knocks the cleaver out of Walker's hands, and pins him to the ground. We learn it was Cal's brother Jerry who drowned in the car accident. Cal looked up and saw Myra at the crash site, and thought she was the one who ran them off the road all this time. So when he spotted her by the cemetery, he tried to confront her. Cal then lied to Miss Cotler and got Myra's address by pretending that he needed a babysitter for his niece. Cal was also the one who drove Donna off the road because he thought it was Myra and only wanted to scare her a little, but things got out of control. Then, tonight, Cal saw all the commotion down by Fear Lake and heard how Walker was the driver all along and saw him trying to drown Myra, which is why he came to the rescue. We then hop to Myra sitting on the couch in a gag-worthy ending. She's playfully chastising Link for being a fucking creep this whole book. But don't worry, they're back together because it's the last 2 pages of the story, and that's how these books always end. We have a couple more pages of resolution where we learn Link and Stephanie really are into witchy shit, but that's because their aunt, Miss Coulter, is a world-renowned professor who specializes in the occult. And that's how this one ends, with Myra getting back together with a frickin' creep, everybody forgetting how Miss Coulter was doing black magic in the bedroom, and ignoring that Hazel clearly has powers. At least there were some supernatural elements to this story finally. Overall, I thought The Sleepwalker was a solid story and a pretty good time. I actually read this book in 2 sittings and found myself thinking about it, which never happens with these books. I liked that we had a cast of suspects who all just happened to be really into magic in some way, and didn't mind that it went full on hypnotism and repressed memories, since that's such an early 90s plot device. I just think it would have been more fun to watch a witch battle with Miss Cottler. I'm gonna give this one 4 out of 5 black cats. Despite its flaws, I had a nice time and can forgive some of the nonsense and dead ends throughout the story. Okay, for Fear Street deaths in The Sleepwalker, there was one. This was poor brother Jerry, who was run off the road by Walker and drowned in a river. This brings our Fear Street series total to 6 deaths. In Fat 90s Moments, we had 6 this week. These included happily making $5 an hour, Walkmans, calling people dweebs, Garfield pajamas, hypnotism, and repressed memories. This brings our Fear Street series total to 40. For useless adults, we had just one, and it's fairly mild. This is Myra's mother, because despite her daughter wandering off multiple times into the night, including nearly drowning, she doesn't do a whole lot to lock her daughter down for the night. This brings our Fear Street series total to 8. This week, in romance, we had Myra and Link finally getting together in what we're supposed to view as a happy moment, even though he was a fucking creep this whole book who needs to learn no means no. This brings our Fear Street series total to 8. Unhealthy relationships makes a solid return this week with 2 clear-cut bad relationships. The first is the obvious Walker and Myra pairing, where he's only into her because she saw him commit murder and proceeded to hypnotize her. The other I'm awarding to Link and Myra because this boy is a creep, and I don't care that Stine wants to use it as a forced happy ending. This gives us a Fear Street series total of 5. In X drama, we once again have Link, because he spends this book creeping around Fear Street watching Myra, and at one point tries forcing himself on her. This brings our Fear Street series total to 2. Our cheesy ending this week is very redundant, with Myra and Link hooking up again. I should just get rid of the cheesy ending counter at this point because it's basically guaranteed to just overlap with romance. Honestly, all these relationship totals probably need restructuring. This brings our Fear Street series total to 6. Well, that's it for The Sleepwalker. I actually really liked this book for the most part. I think the hint at some supernatural elements with Mrs. Cottler's witchy side added a lot of fun to the story. I think repressed memories and hypnosis are BS though. Next week we're looking at Haunted, and it looks like some ghosty romance nonsense will be taking place in this one. Let me know in the comments what you thought of The Sleepwalker. What did you think of the Link romance storyline? Are all magicians evil? Was Hazel the MVP of the story? Also, what did you think of my witchy and nightmare horror clips? Am I always happy for an excuse to feature some Freddy Krueger on here? Yes. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,